things. This is our first installment, and it's only fitting to talk about what this podcast or video log is all about. It's devoted to exploring the what it means to embrace the perspective of non-duality and analytic idealism. A lot of words there, but we'll talk about a little bit about what they mean. Non-duality is a perspective that perceives of all of creation as a fundamental unity, which is to say that there, at root, in ultimate reality, there is no separation between the things that are in the universe. There's no separation between you and me. There's no separation between me and the recording equipment I'm using to get this message to you. And it's expressed in the negative, non-dual, as in not two, because that which is all is not a thing in the way that we typically understand things to be. So to talk about it as one thing is not accurate either. So you use essentially the path of the negative to say non-duality to mean all is one. The implications of that belief are really profound and striking, and which changes the way you look at everything. And this is there are many facets of that of why that perspective changes the way you look at life. So, and we'll be exploring many of those facets throughout this program. Now, there's a companion perspective that I feel is essential in essentially navigating modern life with a non-dual perspective. And that is the perspective, or the philosophical perspective, of analytic idealism. And that perspective offers an alternative to understanding the universe as a physical manifestation. We quite often have this image of the Big Bang creating the universe, and that physical act created all the subatomic particles that we think that make up atoms, that in turn make up molecules, et cetera, et cetera. And the conventional way of understanding how human consciousness arose is that it rose out of evolution through more and more complex operation in the brain that somehow spontaneously created consciousness. Well, the perspective of analytic idealism starts with the premise that the primitive of the universe is not physical, it's not matter, it's actually consciousness. And that consciousness, out of consciousness, arose what we understand to be the physical universe. Now, that said, that doesn't mean that the scientific observations are invalid because of that perspective. Yes, you will find that most scientists take the point of view, for example, that consciousness arose out of brain activity. But the perspective of analytic idealism doesn't countervene science writ large, doesn't object to the scientific method, and certainly doesn't is silent essentially on the accuracy of the observations that arise out of scientific inquiry. It's just saying that the assumptions, the metaphysical assumptions we make arising out of science, namely that the consciousness that we call sentience or intelligence in humans arises out of the physical activity of the brain somehow in ways that have never been explained, is not an accurate view. And that the more accurate view is to understand the what's called the ontological primitive of the universe is consciousness, and that matter, as we understand it, arose out of consciousness. And now we're not talking about an individual person's consciousness or your or my individual mental activity, but something that is more akin to the unconscious that Jung talked about in his writing, and we'll talk about the many facets of that throughout this program. So that's what this channel is about, and I hope that's enough to pique your interest, and there'll be more to come.